The Krelnar were the greatest hunters in the galaxy. For centuries, they had hunted the most dangerous creatures across hundreds of planets. Beasts with acid blood, creatures that could regenerate, monsters that could move faster than the eye could see. None had ever survived against them. The Krelnar were proud, fearless, and confident. Now, they had found a new prey. The reports came from a distant world, a species called humans. They had no sharp claws, no natural armor, no venom or deadly instincts. Yet, somehow, they had survived against creatures 10 times stronger than them. They had even conquered their own planet, defeating beasts that had ruled before them. The Krelnar laughed at the stories. How could a weak, soft species be dangerous? General Varkosh, leader of the Krelnar hunting fleet, stood on the bridge of his warship, staring at the planet below. It was a human colony, one of their outer settlements. Simple, unprotected, no military defenses. It was too easy. His second-in-command, Commander Julik, stood beside him. The scouts report no advanced weapons. Their cities are small. Their people are unarmed. Varkosh smirked. Then this will be a short hunt. The Krelnar loved the thrill of the chase. They did not just kill, they hunted. They enjoyed watching their prey run, panic, and finally surrender to fear. Send down the hunting teams, Varkosh ordered. Bring back some humans alive. I want to see their fear up close. Within minutes, dropships roared down from the warship, slicing through the atmosphere. Krelnar warriors, armed with plasma rifles and energy blades, jumped into the colony. They expected screams, chaos, and running prey. Instead, they found silence. The colony was empty. No people, no movement. Julik scanned the area. This is strange. The humans should be here. Varkosh growled. He hated when prey did not behave as expected. Where were the humans? Had they hidden underground? Were they trying to escape? A scout team moved through the streets, weapons ready. They entered homes, searching for signs of life. Nothing. The food on the tables was still warm, as if the people had just vanished. Then the first scream came. A Krelnar soldier's voice crackled over the comms. They're here. We need Baku. The signal cut off. Julik turned, alarmed. What was that? Another voice broke through the radio. Something is hunting us. I don't. Silence. Varkosh clenched his fists. This was wrong. The Krelnar were supposed to be the hunters, so why were his warriors disappearing? He ordered more troops into the colony. They found nothing. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Just emptiness. Then one of the soldiers noticed something. The shadows were moving. Before he could react, a blur of motion erupted from the darkness. A shape, fast, precise, unstoppable, slammed into him. The last thing he saw was cold, human eyes staring back at him. Varkosh and Julik watched from the warship, listening to the fading screams of their soldiers. Julik's breathing was unsteady. Sir, I think we are not the hunters anymore. For the first time in his life, General Varkosh felt something he had never known before. Fear. The Krelnar were a species that prided themselves on fearlessness. They had never lost a hunt, never felt the terror that they inflicted on others. But now, on this human colony, something was wrong. General Varkosh paced on the bridge of his warship, his sharp claws clicking against the floor. The hunt was supposed to be easy. The humans were supposed to run, scream, and beg for mercy. Instead, his warriors were being hunted, picked off one by one. The last message from the ground had been static and screams. After that, silence. Commander Julik stood by his side, his face tense. Sir, we have lost all contact with the hunting teams. 48 warriors, gone. Varkosh's eyes narrowed. That is impossible. Humans do not have the strength to face us in open combat. They are not fighting in open combat, Julik replied. They are hunting us in the dark. Varkosh growled. He had never faced prey that refused to fight directly. This was something new, something unsettling. He turned to the communications officer. Send in more troops. Double the force. We will flush these humans out. Within minutes, dropships roared down from the warship, sending another 100 elite Krelnar warriors into the colony. They landed in the streets, weapons glowing with energy, scanning every shadow. This time, they came prepared. The Krelnar activated their thermal vision. No more surprises, no more hiding in the dark. If the humans thought they could rely on stealth, they were wrong. The hunting teams moved in formation, sweeping through the empty buildings. The silence was thick, pressing against them like a weight. The only sound was the steady hum of their scanners, searching for signs of life. And then, something moved. A shadow darted across the rooftops. Fast, too fast. The Krelnar turned their weapons, but by the time they aimed, it was already gone. Another figure flickered through the darkness. Then another, and another. The Krelnar realized there was more than one. Varkosh and Julik listened from the warship as their warriors reported strange movements. They were starting to sound uneasy. "They're watching us," one of the Krelnar whispered over the radio. Then a new sound came through the comms. Laughter. Low, cold, human. It echoed through the streets, bouncing off the empty buildings. A voice followed. "Welcome to the hunt." The Krelnar froze. This wasn't right. Prey did not speak like this. Prey begged. Prey ran. A warrior screamed through the radio. "They're everywhere." Gunfire erupted. Plasma blasts lit up the night. The Krelnar fired in all directions, but the humans moved too fast. The first death was brutal. A Krelnar soldier was yanked into the shadows, his scream cut off in an instant. When his squad mates reached him, they found nothing but his weapon on the ground, still warm. Panic started to creep in. Another soldier spun around. Too late. A human dropped from above, a blade flashing in the darkness. One swift slice, and the Krelnar fell without a sound. Varkosh's claws dug into the metal railing as he watched the battle unfold through the helmet cams of his warriors. His elite hunters were being taken down like helpless children. "This is not a fight," Julik whispered. "This is an extermination." The humans were using ambush tactics, traps, and psychological warfare. They never stayed in one place, never engaged for long. Every Krelnar who strayed too far from his squad simply vanished. It was terrifying. Varkosh snarled, slamming his fist on the console. "Enough of this. Burn the colony down. If they want to hide, we will leave them no place to hide." Julik hesitated. "Sir, if we do that, we will lose all chance of capturing them alive." Varkosh's voice was cold. "I no longer care about capturing them. I want them dead." The order was given. Orbital bombardment began. The warship's plasma cannons fired down at the colony, sending waves of fire and destruction across the streets. Buildings exploded, turning to rubble. There was no way anything could survive that. For the first time that night, the battlefield was quiet. Varkosh exhaled, his muscles relaxing. It was over. But then, that was a mistake. The voice came through his own ship's speakers, a human voice. Varkosh froze. "How?" Julik whispered. Then, alarms screamed across the warship. Something was on board. And for the first time in Krelnar history, the hunters finally understood what true terror felt like. Panic spread like wildfire aboard the Krelnar warship. Red warning lights flashed across the bridge, and alarms screamed through the hallways. The command deck, once filled with the confidence of elite warriors, was now thick with fear. General Varkosh's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. His eyes flicked to the holographic screens, scanning for any sign of the intruders. The warship was impenetrable, or so they had thought. How did they get on board? Julik's voice was sharp, his mandibles clicking in frustration. The security chief, a hardened warrior named Carthan, checked the internal scanners. His fingers moved fast over the console, but his eyes widened in shock. "Sir, The humans are already inside the main corridors. They bypassed every security measure. It's as if they were never detected at all. Varkosh snarled. Impossible. We are in deep orbit. The only way on board is through the docking bay, and it is sealed. Julik turned to the communication officer. Send a distress signal. Now. The officer hesitated. Sir, our long-range transmitters are offline. Varkosh stood. What? The officer swallowed. I don't know how, but something has cut off all external signals. We are alone. The weight of those words settled over the command deck. Trapped. Cut off. Hunted. Then, the first scream echoed through the ship. It was not the scream of a warrior in battle. It was the scream of something far worse, a warrior being hunted, helpless, knowing death was coming but unable to stop it. Varkosh turned toward the security screen. One of his soldiers was running. His armor was scratched, his weapon trembling in his hands. Behind him, the corridor was dark. Too dark. Fall back to the security station. Someone on the radio barked. We'll hold the line there. The running soldier gasped for air, his mandibles clicking in sheer terror. They're in the vents. There. The lights flickered. For half a second, everything went dark. When the lights came back, the soldier was gone. Only his weapon remained, clattering to the floor. Julik stepped back from the monitor, his throat tightening. This is wrong. This isn't how a normal enemy fights. This is. Varkosh finished his sentence. A massacre. Another scream. More gunfire. Then silence. Carthan slammed his fist on the console. We need to move. Now. We cannot fight an enemy we cannot see. Varkosh nodded. We will fall back to the command bridge. Secure all doors. Lock down every access point. No one enters. No one leaves. The warriors nodded and moved quickly. They were the Krelnar, the galaxy's greatest hunters. And yet, for the first time, they were the ones running. Meanwhile, deep in the ship, the lone Krelnar squad moved carefully through the lower decks. 5 warriors, fully armed, scanning every shadow. Stay close, the squad leader muttered. They could be anywhere. The air felt heavy. Something was watching them. A faint noise came from the ventilation shaft above. The warriors froze. Then, a body dropped from the ceiling. It landed in front of them with a wet thud. A dead Krelnar soldier, his body mutilated beyond recognition. The squad barely had time to react before the shadows moved. A human stepped forward. His armor was dark, blending with the environment. His face was covered, but his eyes burned with cold precision. The Krelnar raised their weapons, but the human didn't move. Then he smiled. Run. The Krelnar hesitated. That was their mistake. 2 more humans emerged from the darkness. Knives flashed. Plasma fire erupted. But it was too late. The warriors screamed as they were torn apart with terrifying speed. Back at the command deck, the bridge doors slammed shut, locking the remaining Krelnar inside. Varkosh turned to the security monitors. The camera feeds were dying one by one. One last screen flickered. A hallway. Empty. Then a shadow moved. It was small at first. Then it grew. More figures stepped into view. Humans. They walked calmly through the carnage, unfazed by the bodies left behind. One of them looked straight at the camera. And then, the feed cut to black. Julik exhaled sharply. They're coming. Varkosh clenched his fists. The Krelnar had faced many enemies before, but this was not an enemy. This was something worse. This was a nightmare wearing human skin. And now, it was knocking on their door. The Krelnar warship, once a fortress of power, now felt like a dying beast. The corridors were silent except for the flickering of damaged lights and the occasional distant scream, a sound that sent shivers through even the most battle-hardened warriors. General Varkosh stood on the command bridge, his claws gripping the armrests of his chair. His warriors had sealed themselves inside, locking down every access point. But he knew it wouldn't matter. The humans were coming. Julik paced beside him, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "Sir, we have lost contact with all remaining squads. Every security feed is down. No one is responding." Varkosh exhaled sharply. He had fought countless wars. He had led invasions, crushed rebellions, and destroyed entire species that dared to challenge the Krelnar. Never had he felt this helpless. "How many of us are left?" he asked. Carthan, the security chief, checked his datapad. "On this deck, 12, including you and me." Varkosh's stomach twisted. Out of an entire warship of hundreds, only 12 remained, and the humans were still out there. Then something slammed against the bridge doors. Bam! The Krelnar turned, weapons raised. Bam! The steel vibrated. Carthan swallowed. "That door is reinforced. They shouldn't be able to." Bam! A dent appeared. Julik took a step back. "That's not possible." Varkosh narrowed his eyes. "They are testing our defenses. Let them. The moment they break through, we will unleash everything we have." The warriors took position, aiming their weapons at the entrance. They would not die as prey. Meanwhile, in the lower decks, a small squad of humans moved like shadows. They had no heavy armor, no loud mechanical suits, just dark uniforms, knives, silenced weapons, and the terrifying calm of seasoned killers. One of them, a man named Keller, wiped a streak of alien blood from his knife. "Command, we're almost at the bridge." A voice crackled in his earpiece. "Copy that. Make it clean." Keller smirked. "It always is." He turned to his team. 4 of them. That's all it took to bring down an entire warship. 4 humans. They moved forward, stepping over lifeless Krelnar bodies. Their previous kills had been quick, efficient. Now, it was time to finish the hunt. Keller pointed to the maintenance shaft above them. "Ventilation access. We go in quiet, drop in behind them. End it before they know what's happening." The squad nodded. Within moments, they vanished into the shadows. Back on the bridge, Varkosh gritted his teeth as the door began to give way. Deep dents were forming now, the metal bending inward. Then, silence. The pounding stopped. Carthan frowned. "Did they leave?" Julik shook his head. "No, they're too smart for that." Varkosh lifted a claw. Quiet. The room fell into stillness. The warriors' breathing was the only sound. Then, a hissing noise above them. Every Krelnar warrior snapped their heads up. The vents. The ceiling panels burst open. Figures dropped down like ghosts. Humans. Varkosh had no time to react before the first gunshot rang out. 2 warriors fell instantly. Chaos erupted. Plasma fire lit up the room. Krelnar warriors scrambled for cover, but the humans were already among them. Keller moved like a demon, his blade flashing through the air. 1 cut. 1 kill. A Krelnar lunged at him. Keller ducked, spun behind him, and drove a knife into the base of his skull. Another warrior fired wildly. One of Keller's squadmates dropped from the shadows above, landing behind the shooter. A single twist of the neck, and the Krelnar collapsed, lifeless. Julik fired his plasma rifle, hitting one human in the arm. The man barely flinched. Instead, he shot Julik in the leg, sending him crashing to the floor. Varkosh roared, charging at Keller. His claws slashed through the air, missing by inches. Keller sidestepped smoothly and plunged his blade into Varkosh's side. The Krelnar general gasped. Pain. Real pain. He staggered back, clutching his wound. He had never been wounded in combat before. The fight was over in less than a minute. The greatest hunters in the galaxy were dead. Varkosh fell to his knees. Only he and Julik remained. Keller crouched in front of him, wiping his blade clean. Those cold human eyes stared into his. "You thought you were the strongest." Keller's voice was calm, almost bored. But strength means nothing if you don't know how to use it. Varkosh gasped for breath. You are monsters. Keller smirked. Maybe. Then, without hesitation, he slit Varkosh's throat. The great general of the Krellmer fell forward, lifeless. Julik trembled on the floor, his leg wounded, his mind shattered. The Krellmer were supposed to be the apex predators. But now, staring up at these human warriors, he realized the truth. They had never been the hunters. They had always been prey. Keller turned to his squad. Clear the ship. Make sure there are no survivors. Julik's eyes widened. No. He tried to crawl away, but a sharp pain exploded in his skull, and everything went black. Silence settled over the warship, a silence so deep it felt like the ship itself had stopped breathing. The great Krellmer vessel, once filled with warriors who boasted of their strength, was now little more than a graveyard. Julik awoke to the feeling of cold metal beneath him. His body ached, his vision blurred. He was alive. But as his mind cleared, a terrible realization hit him. He was the only one. His hands trembled as he pushed himself up. His leg burned where the human had shot him, but the pain didn't matter. What mattered was survival. The bridge was dark. The bodies of his fallen comrades surrounded him, their lifeless eyes staring into nothingness. The air smelled of plasma burns and death. Julik reached for his communicator with shaking claws. Command. His voice cracked. This is Julik. The humans. They took the ship. Everyone else is dead. A moment of static. Then a voice, barely more than a whisper. Julik. He recognized it. Commander Teresh, one of the fleet's officers. She had to be on a nearby vessel. Yes, he whispered back. I'm still here. Silence. Then, her next words made his blood freeze. No, Julik, you're not. His breath caught. What do you mean? Teresh's voice was laced with quiet horror. The humans activated the ship's distress beacon. We received the data logs. We saw the footage from the security feeds before they went dark. Julik's pulse pounded. Then send reinforcements. We can still. You don't understand. Teresh's voice was barely above a whisper. Julik, they let you live. A cold chill crawled down his spine. He turned his head slowly, looking around the bridge. She was right. The humans had slaughtered every last Krellmer on board, but they had left him. Why? He swallowed hard. What are you saying? Teresh hesitated. We analyzed the pattern of their attacks. They move too fast for normal warriors. They don't just fight. They hunt. Julik gritted his teeth. Yes, I know. I saw them myself. No, you don't understand. Teresh's voice was sharp now. They don't just kill the enemy. They leave survivors, one or two. Always. Julik's mouth went dry. They want survivors to spread fear, she continued. It's a strategy. A message. Every time they strike, they leave someone alive. Someone who will crawl back to their people and whisper about the monsters who walk on two legs. Julik clenched his claws. No, this couldn't be. He thought of the humans moving through the ship, cold, efficient, unstoppable. He thought of the way they had ignored him at the end. Had they spared him? Or had they chosen him? His breathing grew ragged. Teresh's next words were even worse. Julik, I can't let you return. His stomach twisted. What? I'm sorry, she said, voice heavy. If you come back, you'll bring their fear with you. It will spread through the fleet, through our worlds. The High Command won't risk it. Julik stumbled back, horror sinking in. His own people were abandoning him. He turned towards the viewport, looking at the endless void beyond. In the distance, Krellmer warships floated in formation. He had served them his entire life, fought for them, killed for them. And now, because of the humans, he was nothing more than a ghost. A loud metallic thud behind him made him freeze. He turned slowly. In the dim light, a human stood at the entrance of the bridge. Not a soldier, not a warrior in heavy armor, just a man, calm, relaxed, watching him. Julik's blood turned to ice. He reached for his weapon, but he already knew. It was too late. The human stepped forward, tilting his head. "We let you call them," he said, his voice steady. "We wanted to see what they would do." Julik's claws tightened around his gun. "Why?" The human smiled. "Because now you know," he said. "Now you understand." Julik's heart pounded. "Understand what?" he rasped. The human's gaze was like a blade. "That your kind was never the hunter." Julik's breath hitched. "You were just the first prey to realize it." A shot rang out. Everything went dark. Darkness, silence, cold. Julik drifted between life and death. His body ached, but it was the silence that truly terrified him. He had expected to die. The humans had shot him. But the fact that he was still breathing, still alive, meant something worse. They had chosen to keep him. His eyes fluttered open. His head throbbed. The first thing he saw was metal. Dark walls, exposed wires, dim red emergency lights. The air smelled of rust and something else. Something old. Something dead. He was in a prison cell. Not on his ship. Not on any Krelmar warship. The walls were too primitive. Too human. His claws twitched. He tested his restraints. His arms were tied to the chair, his legs bound. But they hadn't restrained his neck. They wanted him to look. And so he did. Across from him stood a single human. The same man from the bridge. He wasn't armored. No visible weapons. Just standing there, watching. Julik swallowed. His voice was hoarse. "What do you want?" The human tilted his head. "I want you to listen." Julik bared his teeth. "Kill me and be done with it." The human smiled, but there was no humor in it. Not yet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button. Julik's ears filled with a sound. A voice. A Krelmar voice. His breath caught. It was Teresh. "He cannot return. If he does, we risk losing everything. The humans. They are something else. If he has seen them, if he has survived, then he is already lost." Julik's heart pounded. They really had abandoned him. The human clicked off the recording. "Now you understand." Julik's claws curled into fists. "You think I care? You think you can turn me against my people?" The human chuckled. "No." He stepped closer. "But I do think you care about something else." Julik snarled. "And what is that?" The human's eyes turned cold. "Survival." Julik went silent. The human gestured to the walls. "This ship is older than your empire. We found it drifting in the void. An ancient wreck from a war long forgotten. We repaired it, repurposed it. It's ours now." Julik's mind raced. That explained the strange design, the primitive yet effective structure. The human continued, voice low. "You are not the first Krelmar to sit in that chair. You are not the first to be abandoned by your people." He leaned forward. "And you will not be the last." Julik hissed. "Lies." The human smirked. "Is it?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small holodisc. With a flick of his wrist, he activated it. Julik's blood ran cold. A Krelmar. Not a soldier. Not a warrior. A civilian. He was tied to the same chair, eyes wide with terror. He looked starved, broken. His voice was shaky. "They left me," the Krelmar on the holo recording whispered. "They left me because I saw. Because I survived." He took a deep breath, then whispered two final words. "Fear them." The recording ended. Julik's breathing grew shallow. The human leaned in, his face unreadable. "Now tell me, Julik, do you still think your people are the strong ones?" Julik clenched his teeth. "We are warriors." The human nodded. And yet, your warriors run from us. Julek wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but his people had abandoned him. That much was clear. And the humans had proof of others like him. The human took a step back. Your fleet will come looking for you soon. They'll want to know what happened to their missing ship, and we will let them find us. Julek's eyes widened. You want them to come. The human grinned. Oh yes. Julek's mind raced. This was a trap set for his people. His heart pounded. He had to escape, had to warn them. The human's smile didn't fade, as if he knew exactly what Julek was thinking. You're free to go, the human said suddenly. Julek froze. What? The human gestured to the door. Unlocked. No tricks, the human said. You can leave. Julek didn't move. Why? The human's smile widened. Because when you run back to your people, you'll carry something far more dangerous than any weapon. Julek swallowed hard. And what is that? The human's voice was a whisper now. The truth. Julek bolted. He didn't think. He didn't stop. He ran through the corridors of the ancient ship, his claws clicking against the floor. The humans didn't chase him, didn't try to stop him. He found an escape pod. He launched it without hesitation. As he drifted through the void, he saw his people's fleet in the distance. He was going home. But deep down, he already knew. Nothing would ever be the same again. Julek's escape pod drifted toward the Krelnar fleet, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind was a storm. Fear, anger, and confusion twisted together, choking him. He had expected to die on that human warship. Instead, they let him go. Not out of mercy. Out of something far worse. His claws dug into the armrests as the pod was pulled into the hangar of a massive Krelnar battleship. The moment the doors sealed, he was surrounded. Dozens of warriors aimed their weapons at him. Step out, a voice barked through the comms. Julek hesitated. They feared him, his own people. Slowly, he stood, raising his hands in surrender. The moment he stepped onto the cold steel floor, a force field snapped around him, a containment field, as if he were a danger. Commander Teresh emerged from the crowd, his reptilian face unreadable. His dark eyes locked onto Julek's. You survived, Teresh said. No warmth, no relief, just cold analysis. Julek forced himself to stand tall. Yes. Teresh studied him. Were you tortured? Julek hesitated. No. The warriors around him exchanged uneasy glances. That was the problem. If the humans had tortured him, it would have been normal. Expected. But they didn't. They let him go. Julek clenched his fists. They wanted me to return. Teresh's jaw tightened. What did they show you? Julek exhaled sharply. He knew this was a test. The humans had warned him. His own people would doubt him. They might even kill him. But the images from that recording haunted him. The Krelnar prisoner. Starving. Abandoned. Forgotten. They showed me. Others like me, Julek admitted. Others who survived encounters with them. And do you know what all of them had in common? Teresh's claws twitched. Speak. Julek's voice dropped. They were all abandoned. Silence. The warriors shifted uneasily. Julek stared at Teresh. Is it true? Teresh didn't respond. Julek stepped closer to the force field. You always told us that no warrior gets left behind. That we fight together. His voice hardened. But the humans, they knew about us. About the ones you left to die. Teresh's nostrils flared. That information is restricted. Julek's stomach turned. Restricted. Not false. Not a lie. They had abandoned others. Just like they abandoned him. Rage burned in his chest. We called them primitive. Weak. But they knew our tactics. Our weaknesses. They used fear itself as a weapon. He took a breath. And they let me live so I could bring that fear to you. Teresh's tail flicked. a sign of unease. Julik pressed on. "You don't want me to speak, do you?" He narrowed his eyes. "Because if I do, the others will know the truth. They'll know the humans aren't just another enemy. They are something else." Teresh stepped closer. "You will remain silent." Julik bared his teeth. "No." The air in the room grew tense. And then, alarms blared. Julik's blood ran cold. They had arrived. The humans. Teresh's calm crackled. "Commander, multiple human warships have exited FTL. They are holding position outside the fleet. Holding position, not attacking." Julik's mind raced. "They're waiting." Teresh snapped his gaze to him. "For what?" Julik clenched his jaw. "For me." He turned to the view screen as it activated. And there it was. The human warship, not the battered wreck he had first believed. No, now he understood. It was something ancient. Something repurposed. Something terrifying. And then, the screen flickered. A transmission. A single human appeared. The same one who had let him go. His voice was calm, cold, unshaken. "Krelnar fleet," he said. "You know who we are." Teresh stood tall. "You are trespassing in our territory." The human smiled. "Am I?" A beat of silence. Then, the human spoke again. "You have a choice." Julik tensed. The human's voice remained eerily calm. "You can fire upon us. But if you do, understand this. You will not remember the war you started." A ripple of unease ran through the Krelnar warriors. Teresh scoffed. "Empty threats." The human exhaled softly. "Is it?" Another screen flickered. Data appeared. Tactical readouts. The entire Krelnar fleet's formation, weaknesses, energy outputs. They had already mapped everything. Julik swallowed. They had been watching this whole time. The human's voice softened. "There doesn't have to be a war." Julik watched Teresh. This was the moment. If Teresh ordered an attack, they would all die. Julik had no doubt now. And for the first time in his life, he saw fear in his commander's eyes. Teresh's jaw clenched. Slowly, he turned to his officers. "Stand down." Julik exhaled. They had won. Not with fire. Not with brute force. But with something far deadlier. They had won with fear. The transmission cut. The human warship lingered a moment longer. Then, without a single shot fired, it turned and vanished into the void. Julik stared at the empty space where it had been, and he realized the terrible truth. The Krelnar Empire had ruled through fear for centuries. But now, they had learned what it was to be prey. They had learned what it was to fear, and they would never forget it.